It's Mo. It is November and I started reading Florida. So Florida is a short story collection by Lauren Groff, and it's the first Lauren Groff that I've ever read. I got this on my TBR Spin as a bonus book. So TBR Spin is a super fun booktube game that was created by Sarah at Freshly Read Books and Jill at The Book Bully, and it is based on and inspired by the booktube Spin by Rick McDonnell and the TBR Tackle by Kieran at Katie Books. In this version of this game, you pick 12 books at the beginning of the year off of your TBR that you want to read throughout the year, and each month Jill or Sarah spin a wheel and there are prompts on the wheel, and the prompts lead you to pick a book off of your stack. So in January we had 12 books, in February we had 11 books, and I believe I got this book sometime around April or May when Sarah had Kieran on as a guest prompt. So he created a prompt that was kind of outside of the regular prompt wheel, and I got Florida. I started reading this around that time, but I was reading something else as well, either another short story collection or the other book for that month's prompt for TBR Spin, that I decided to put this one aside. I knew that I wanted to complete this book by the end of the year, and I knew that I wanted to vlog this book. I vlog all my TBR Spin books. I vlog a lot of my yearly challenge books, so I knew I wanted to do a kind of extra vlog by the end of the year. It's November, so I really need to get reading this if I want to get it done in that time. So far, I am really enjoying it. When I first started it, I read 2 short stories. Oh, I remember what happened. I didn't know that this was a book of short stories. I read the first story and I was like, oh wow, this is really interesting. The first story is called Ghost and Empties, and it is about a woman who is a wife and a mother, but recently she is taken to running at all times of the day and night to keep herself in check. She finds her patience running out. She finds herself to have a very short fuse and get angry very easily, and so running helps her with that. Now, I don't remember the end of what happens in this story anymore because I did read it like 5 or 6 months ago, but I remembered really liking it. And at the end of that story, I went on to the next story, At the Round Earth's Imagined Corners, and I realized that this was a book of short stories, not a book with just fun chapter names. The second story is about a man who, his father has a huge parcel of land in Florida, and he kind of can't wait as a young person to get out of the swamps of Florida, but as he gets older and his father passes away and leaves him those swamps, he becomes more and more enamored of that area. He and his wife move there, have kids. That story is kind of about his history, but also about what's currently happening to him as he becomes an old man like his father was. So those were the 2 short stories that I read initially, and then since starting this again in November, I read Dogs Go Wolf. It's about a small island off the coast of Florida and about 2 young girls who are left alone there for various reasons. That one was really interesting. A lot of these stories didn't go the way that I thought they would. The Midnight Zone is the next one that I read, and that is about a family vacationing in the swamps of Florida at a remote cabin when the father is called away and the mother has to take care of the 2 young boys. The theme of that one is that there is a wild cat out in the jungle, and she kind of feels the looming danger of that cat at all times. And that one really didn't go the way I thought it would, which was cool. And then I read Eyewall. That story was about a woman who was divorced in older age but kept her house in Florida, where it's like an old historic house, and when a storm comes, a hurricane threatens her house, she decides to stay in it. And now I'm on For the God of Love, For the Love of God, and I think there's about, well, I don't know how many more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So with that, I have 6 more stories to go. So that's the middle story. There's like 11 or 12 stories altogether. I'm really enjoying it. I think Lauren Groff's writing is absolutely fantastic. I see why everybody loves her writing. I really like that the stories haven't gone in the direction that I've thought they would. There has been a little bit of animal violence, especially in the last one about the hurricane, but nothing cruel or used as like a cautionary tale. I thought for sure the one with the little girl set on an island, because there's a dog in that one, and the one with the panther Panther because there's a dog within that one. I thought there would be like a lot more animal cruelty and animal death, and there wasn't. So I enjoy that about it. I think you can tell how much Lauren Groff loves animals and relates to them and sees them as like common creatures. And then also I really enjoy how much she loves Florida and how much place setting there is, how much environment there is, and how that the settings within Florida are really playing a role in each story. I've never been to Florida, and honestly I don't know when I would get there in today's world. One of my really great friends lives in Florida and she always wants me to come down. I would love to see the Gulf Coast of Florida. That's the place besides the Florida Keys that I'm the most interested in, but I've always wanted to go there and see NASA. I've always wanted to go there and see the Wiki Weechi mermaids. So maybe one day, but probably not anytime soon. So I'm going to continue reading this throughout the rest of November and also into December, and I will keep you updated on the stories. But so far, this having been the first Lauren Groff that I've ever read, I'm loving it, and I'm super glad that I have another one of hers on my TBR, and I will definitely be picking up more from her. I have continued reading Florida by Lauren Groff. I have 2 short stories left in this. Let me see. The short stories that I read since I talked to you were For the God of Love, For the Love of God, Salvador, Flower Hunters, Above and Below. I honestly don't remember what any of those were about at this point because it's been quite a while since I updated you. I have been putting off reading the last 2 short stories so that I can make this update, and I think that I'm doing myself a disservice by doing that. And I think I'm falling into the trap of a reading to create content rather than creating content about reading. So I wanted to check in another time before I finish these short stories, and I keep not being able to do this check-in, so I keep putting off reading, and it's really put me in a reading slump. Between putting off reading this and reading The Mystery of Mrs. Christie, which is going to be one of my worst books of the year, I have fallen into a reading slump. It's the middle of December. I've only read 4 books so far, which is far less than I normally do, which is fine, but you know, no one likes to be in a reading slump. No one likes those slumpy feelings. So this is a reminder to you and a reminder to myself to read when you want to read what you want to read what makes you happy. Make sure you DNF when you want to. Make sure that you don't read solely for video content. So anyway, back to Florida. I really like this one so far. I am excited to read the last 2 short stories and finish this one up. I think that Lauren Groff's writing in this is amazing. She has a lot of common themes of motherhood and women's independence and the idea of possibly losing your independence when you're a mother. And it's interesting that she has very strong female characters in a lot of these stories, but they also have a lot of intense flaws. Some of the stories are about women who know that they are not capable of things but try things anyway. Some of the stories are about women with anger issues. And all of the stories are just about like flawed characters. So they're really fascinating to read. And I think that each story feels different and self-contained so far, but there is an overarching vibe or feeling to her writing, even if the writing style is not exactly the same from story to story. So I'm really enjoying this. I can't wait to finish. I know I have Matrix on my TBR, so I'm going to be very excited to get that one, and I would definitely pick up other books by Lauren Groff just based on this. When I read the last 2 short stories, I will come back to you and we will finish this TBR Spin bonus video. It is it's the end, getting to the end of December, and I finally finished Florida. I finished this a little while ago. I just had 2 stories left to go, but one of the stories was the longest stories. The last 2 stories that I had to read were snake stories, which is kind of told in these little vignettes, and of course has a little bit to do with Adam and Eve, as you might expect, but it's mostly about a woman walking home with her husband from a party and them discussing things and her kind of looking back at how snakes has affected her through her life. And then I think this is pronounced Ypor or Ypor. It's French, so of course I'm terrible at it. I know Yves Saint Laurent starts with a Y, so I'm guessing that this is Ypor, and like because France doesn't pronounce their end consonants sometimes. I don't know. I'm really bad at French. I love languages, but I find French to be so extremely difficult. Anyway, this one was about a mother who is struggling in her relationship to her husband. They live in Florida with her 2 small sons. She is a writer and a historian, and she's obsessed with a French writer. So when she gets the opportunity to take her boys to France to escape the hot Florida summer, she jumps on that chance, and this is kind of about their trip and what she discovers about herself and what she discovers about her relationship and what she discovers about her children. And it was about 60 pages, so it was definitely by far the longest in the book. I think most of these stories, and it is exemplified by the last story, are about women who have a underlying dread and fear running through them. They suffer with anxiety, they suffer with alcoholism, they suffer with kind of resentment of men and the patriarchy and how society has groomed them to be fearful, to be incompetent, to not be competent in the things that they should be, even like their own child rearing. And I think that that is a very common theme throughout this book. Women trying to do things that they think they should be able to do and failing at those things to the potential peril of themselves and others. It's really interesting, especially because Lauren Groff is a wife and mother who lives in Florida. I mean, I would assume that some of this reflects her own feeling of anxiety, of climate anxiety, of anxiety over rearing children, anger over rearing children, anger at men, specifically the men in these women's lives, like their husbands. That's always just an interesting thing to see put out on the page. Maybe 1 novel or 2 novels with those themes you could imagine that they're just a theme that she's interested in, but an entire collection of short stories, or almost an entire collection, where that is the common theme. It seems like something that is on her mind. Most of the stories don't come to really bad ends. Like the majority of the stories don't have necessarily unhappy endings. They don't necessarily have happy endings, certainly, but there's not a lot of intense violence. There is some violence, sexual assault. There are some aspects of that. Injury, close calls to injury or death are a common theme in this book. But the majority of them are kind of, that is the worst thing, you know, that close call. You can imagine the characters moving on with their lives, just like we've all potentially had close calls. Obviously some worse than others. Each story carries with it a heaviness and a dread of the potential bad thing. Not to the point in books where, like, I hate when books have that dread that you know something bad is going to happen, but you have this fear, this anxiety over the whole story, whether it be, you know, a 3 or 4 page story or whether it be a 60-page story. So it is very, like, heavy and makes you identify and sympathize and empathize with the main characters who are feeling this all the time, and that their lives are inextricably connected with that dread. So I thought it was really effective, really great. So I'm happy to have completed it. I am working on my December book for the TBR Spin, but I had a little snag with it, so that video is going to come out after this one. So we know that the TBR Spin is coming back for 2024. So after I've read this one, I decided that I want to talk about my new spin list in this video, because this video is going to come out like right around the beginning of January. I'm not going to watch the prompt for January in this vlog. I will watch that in my December, but I wanted to get myself ready and show you my list of books. These are in no particular order, but one of the things that I want to concentrate on after reading reading Florida in my 2024 TBR Spin is short story collections, because although that one took me an excruciatingly long time to read, I think I started reading it in the month that it was picked and then didn't finish it until December, so 6 or more months. I did really enjoy the experience of reading a short story collection for the TBR Spin. I think it gives me a lot to talk about and think about, and gives me an opportunity to try an author that I've never read from before, or maybe some authors that I have read from before. So my book number 1 is going to be The Office of Historical Corrections by Daniel Evans. I wanted to read this one from the first moment that I heard about it. I thought it sounded really, really interesting, but I never got around to it. And it's been sitting on my shelf for like 3 years. So it's time to get this one read. One thing that I like to do with my TBR Spin books is to prioritize books or put books on the list that are intimidating to me, books that I've either tried to pick up or wanted to pick up but for some reason just haven't. And that goes right along with short stories, because a lot of times I don't pick up short story collections just because they seem difficult to read. This is a novella and a bunch of short stories. I think they're speculative, and I'm super excited to get to this one. Next is a book that I've had on a lot of TBRs, on a lot of lists, but maybe the TBR Spin will help me get to it, and that is The Ones We're Meant to Find by Joan He. This is a climate fiction book about 2 sisters who are separated from each other and how they come together. This is a YA novel, and most people really don't like this book, but I don't know. I'm just really interested in it, and I feel like if I don't do something drastic to read it, I never will. Next, let's do another short story collection. This is a newer one to me, and that is How to Love a Jamaican by Alexa Arthurs. This is a collection of Jamaican stories, all told by Jamaican women characters, I believe, but I don't really know much about it. It was on my want to read list. I got it at the last book sale that I went to in December, and I'm excited to get to that one. Earlier this year, I think, I picked up Build Your House Around My Body by Violet Coopersmith. This was up for the Women's Prize maybe, or possibly the International Booker Prize. I can't remember. I believe Violet Coopersmith is a Vietnamese author, and this one's chunky. It's almost 400 pages, and I really don't remember anything about what this was about, but I do remember being interested in it when it was a prize book, so it's a good one to put on the list. Next, we have The Stationery Shop by Marhan Kamali. This is an Iranian author, and this one is supposed to be really sad and heartfelt, kind of women's fiction, which gives me pause. I'm not like a big heartfelt reader, and I'm not a big women's fiction reader, but I am excited to get to this one. I've heard only good things about this, and I've heard it from people who read all sorts of different books, people who read genre fiction more like I do, and people who read literary fiction, and people who read women's fiction, so this is a good one for the TBR Spin. Another recent acquisition is The Dead Take the A Train by Cassandra Caw and Richard Kadri. I've never read from either of those authors, but both have books that I'm interested in. I got this proof for $1. It is horror, perhaps, sci-fi, and it is almost 400 pages as well, so a chunky one that I would probably put off reading if I don't get it in the Spin, but one that I really want to get to. Next, we have another TBR vet. This one I got way back in 2020, I believe, and that is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. I haven't read any Carmen Maria Machado yet. These are short stories that are all horror-based and have to do with queerness, have a little bit of auto-fiction in them, disturbing, have a lot of violence, a lot of sexual violence against women in her work. I know that people really enjoy this one. Well, I know that people really got a lot out of reading this book. Maybe not as much as her other short story collection called In the Dream House, which is about her life with an abusive partner. This is more speculative, more fiction, and it's one that I've had forever. Why haven't I gotten to it? I don't know. Another one that I've had since 2020 is Sorrowland by River Solomon. I read my first River Solomon novel this year in 2023, which was, what is that one called? The one about mermaids. Oh my gosh, I can't think of the name. I'll put a picture of it here. I did really enjoy that one. It was very short, whereas this one is very long. I think this book follows a mother who escapes from some sort of compound or cult in the woods and gives birth to her children in the woods. Woods. That's about all I know. I know that it's horror. This cover is amazing. I mean, this is like such a stunning cover. This is also a proof, I think, actually. This is the finished cover as well. And I've been wanting to get to it, but it's a chunker and it's hard subject matter, you know, it's all makes it a little bit difficult to read. This one is just over 350 pages. Next, we have Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq. This is a Native American author, or Native Canadian. She might be Canadian, I'm not sure. And I've heard mixed things about this one. It's kind of mixed style, like some of it's in verse and some of it is prose and some of it's vignette-y. There's illustrations in here. It has these amazing red sprayed edges. I actually have no idea what this is about at all, but I do really want to get to it. I've picked this one up like 4 or 5 times this year, like in hopes to get to it, and I just never have. So I think the spin is a good way to do that. How many books is that? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so 10, 11, 12. Okay, perfect. The next book on my list is The Spirit of Science Fiction, a novel by Roberto Bolaño. I do not know what this is about. I mean, it says science fiction on the cover. I don't know where I got this one either. Probably a used book sale. It just looks really interesting to me. It is quite a short one. I tried to pick a mix of short things and long things for this new list. The last short story collection that I want to get to, possibly on the TBR Spin, but if it never comes up or doesn't come up, I might read it sooner than that, is Lot by Brian Washington. This is one of the very last books that I've acquired in 2024. I got it just the other day, the day after Christmas, Boxing Day, and this is a collection of short stories by the author of Memorial. So I read Memorial earlier this year. I'm super interested in his new release. I liked Memorial, and I believe that these short stories probably follow a similar theme of like men, gay men, how they interact with their families, but I really am keen to read more Brian Washington. And then finally, for the TBR Spin, I put on The Sleeping Car Porter by Suzette Mayer. I got this earlier this year, and it is a short novel. I believe it was the winner of the Giller Prize. It says finalist on this book, but I think it actually won the Giller Prize, and I think it was also longlisted for the Booker, maybe? I've been interested since I heard about it then, and I haven't gotten to it yet, so why not put it on the TBR Spin list? So those are the 12 books on my TBR Spin list. When I finish my December book, at the end of my December TBR Spin reading vlog, we will pick the prompt for January, and I will do like a brief overview of these, but I won't talk about them in depth. So if you are coming here from that, I hope you skipped to this part, or maybe you watched the whole vlog. I don't know. Let me know if you participated in the TBR Spin for 2023. Let me know if you're planning on participating in 2024. If you are and you want to put your list down below so that we can talk about it, that would be great. But other than that, I will see you in my next TBR Spin video, and I will see you in another video before that. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!